So United look close to signing Frenkie de Jong from Barcelona, but it's not just about transfers, it's about getting the best out of the players we've got. That's what Ten Hag is here to do. So we're going to have a look at which players Ten Hag can revive in this Manchester United squad. Hello and welcome to Stretford Paddock. My name is Joe. That is Alex Bagley. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm good, mate. Very, very good.
We've all got caught up in this transfer bonanza, as we tend to do every single year. But a manager isn't just managing the new transfers, is he? He's not just managing Frenkie. He's got like 22 players that are already there that he needs to get the best out of. And I think some people, or not some people, we're all at times guilty of forgetting that.
Yeah, he's not going to just come in and sign 11 new players, have a completely different starting 11, unless Pep Guardiola, and it happens now and again.
But even then, it took him a couple of years to get there. But it will take
some time as well, and the instant impact and doing it straight away and being able to compete straight out of the blocks, whether that is getting top four, whether that is winning the trophy, you're not going to get 11 new players to do that. You're going to have to work with what you've got. So there's going to be a lot of players that underperformed last year, that if we're going to do anything this year at Manchester United and achieve anything, you know, we've talked about the top four, winning trophies, whether that's Europa League, FA Cup, you're going to need these players to perform this season.
And let's not forget, the bones of this team, or more than the bones of this team, did finish second just over 12 months ago. It's not a team that has consistently finished 6th, 7th, 5th. No. You know, 2 out of the last 3 years, we've finished in the top 3. So this isn't an awful squad. It's just about getting the most out of them. Let's start with a big one, and we'll go through a couple of players here that we think Ten Hag can really have an impact on. One of them that he has to have an impact on, because otherwise it's going to be an absolute disaster, is the current captain, Harry Maguire.
Yeah.
Now, he's someone that in the first 2 years at United, I think most people saw the transfer as a positive one, whether you call it an outrageous success or not. Most people weren't, clamouring for Harry Maguire to leave the club 12 months ago. Yep. Fast forward 12 months to now, he's been blamed for almost everything that's gone wrong at Manchester United. He's had an awful season. But do you think there's still sort of life in that yet? Or does there have to be because of how much we paid for him?
I think there's... Number one, I think there has to be, because I don't think Manchester United are going to sell an £80 million Harry Maguire this year. Even in the case of, as well, there was a talk about Barcelona being interested and things like that.
Can't be that bad.
And people ridiculing it, that the fact that we haven't just gone, yes, take him, whatever. But Harry Maguire, like you've mentioned there, was a very good player for 2 seasons at Manchester United. There are a lot of people, I think, I agree with this, that I think that one of the major reasons we didn't win that Europa League final against Villarreal was because he was missing and he didn't play, and that was one of the big misses. He's been very good for England in international football. You can say what you want. He has been good for England.
Yep.
And he is a good player. I think that the whole team last season was very, very poor, and it did highlight all of Harry Maguire's faults that he does have, and I think people completely agree that he does have some faults and he does do things badly at times. But he is a very good footballer. There's a reason why Jose Mourinho wanted him £50 million the summer before he left. There's a reason that Pep Guardiola that same summer was looking at Harry Maguire. Whether he should be an £80 million player and captain Manchester United is a different question.
Definitely.
But him being a good centre-half and someone that's going to play, and I said I would put money on Harry Maguire starting the first game of this season, mainly because he won't be injured, because he never usually is, and also because I think he's quite a good player.
Definitely. And again, Man United conceded more goals than Burnley this season. You're not telling me, no one is going to tell me that Harry Maguire and Raphael Varane are worse centre-backs than Ben Mee and James Tarkowski.
No.
I just don't believe that. That is not true. So the reason we conceded those goals isn't just because our centre-backs are awful. It's because of the structure around them. Maybe the full-backs letting them down a bit. Obviously, a huge lacking confidence from those players themselves, but also the players in front of them that we'll get to in a little bit, into talking about Fred and obviously Frenkie de Jong coming in. I think there's obviously much more of a player than we've seen out of Harry Maguire.
Yep.
Let's have a look at some of his statistics then, because he is someone that, on paper, is still an impressive player, still has qualities that are, you can look at and say he's very good at that. So he's very good at bringing the ball out with the ball at his feet. That's one thing he's excellent at, and playing sort of vertical passes, which is obviously balls sort of up through the lines, not across the pitch. So in terms of, despite the fact that United have been lacking a holding midfielder, Maguire has been consistently capable of moving the ball into the final third, whereas his balls are in the 81st percentile for progressive carries, which obviously means he dribbles the ball up, which again is an indicator why United play so much down the left-hand side. Part of it is because, Wan-Bissaka isn't very good on the ball, but also Maguire is. He's in the 85th percentile for passes made into the final third. And the interesting thing with that is he makes more of those passes into the final third from the second third. Rather than his own third, which means that he's not just playing long balls from deep. He drives up with the ball at his feet and then plays what are easy, just essentially shorter, easier passes because he is good at bringing the ball out from the back, and that's something that Ten Hag wants in his centre backs, isn't it?
He does, yeah. You've seen that, and we've talked about this on this channel, that his centre backs are people that want to step forward, step into midfield, and get involved in play. Now, not only that is, Harry Maguire does that a lot for England. A lot of people say, look, he does that because he's in a 3, he's more comfortable of doing it. Ten Hag plays in a 2 and still has his centre halves do that. And we're going to look at it as well. He's not always done that he's now moved on to having Timber and Martinez, 2 very, very mobile centre halves that can move, shorter, quicker players. But he's done this all his time at Ajax. He did it when he had Daley Blind playing at centre half, who we've seen at Manchester United isn't the quickest, is a very good ball player. But to allow someone like Daley Blind to step up, with the Ligt next to him, who isn't the quickest either, to recover from him, this is what Ten Hag wants. And he's not essentially always going to do it with a ridiculously pacey centre half alongside him.
Yeah.
He's going to do it with players like Harry Maguire, who are elite on the ball stepping forward.
Yeah, I think, and Daley Blind's a good example because he's not the quickest. I think he's better on the ball than Maguire is. He's got a better passing range than Maguire, but he isn't someone that relies on his pace. Like you said, he's often used on that left back position now. But when Ajax are in possession, they often push one fullback forward and the other fullback tucks across as a sort of back 3. So you're often playing as a more central centre back in there, and in those roles, Daley Blind ranks in the 99th percentile for balls into the final third, 99th percentile for progressive carries, 98th percentile in touches in the middle third as well. So he's always on the ball and bringing it forward. And again, those stats are higher than Maguire's, but again, it's Maguire's strong suit as well. And he isn't playing in a system that encourages him to sort of bring the ball forward. At the minute he sort of plays it to Luke Shaw, who takes it down, plays it into, we don't seem to have a kind of solid, well-oiled way of playing the ball out from the back. No. One of the reasons Daley Blind's stats are so high isn't just because he's good at passing, it's because Ajax and Ten Hag use his qualities to his advantage. And hopefully, instead of using Maguire's weaknesses against him like we've seen this season, we'll be able to play in a way that uses them to our advantage, because whether you like it or not, he is one of the better attacking centre backs in the league, and those stats prove it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that we haven't had the other option as well. I think we talked about a midfielder willing to take the ball off the centre backs, which we're hoping that Frankie de Jong is that player that does that. He may not do that all the time, and the reason the struggle is at the minute is if you press Maguire, he's not got another option other than go back to the goalkeeper. Same thing on the other side. If you press Varane, that's the other option. But usually you can't press the 2 centre-halves and the midfielder in there. And that's where you kind of create that overload at the back. And you're hoping that if you've got that other option in Frankie de Jong, players are going to press him because he's going to be the one that wants the ball. But then you give a bit more space to Maguire. You allow Maguire or Varane to step out. And you're hoping that kind of gives him the freedom. Other than at this moment in time, the ball's always going to Maguire, as we've mentioned. Always goes up that left-hand side because that's the only option we've got. And then he's got to bypass midfield because we haven't got a midfield that wants the ball. You're hoping that this fix, with Ten Hag's tactics around it, you'll get the best out of Harry Maguire next season.
Yeah, definitely. Let's move on to Marcus Rashford then, because he's another person who, again, up until this season, no one was saying Marcus Rashford was a bad thing at Manchester United. He'd had not completely linear, but almost season after season, better stats than the year before, better stats, to the point where last season it was, I think top 5 most productive wingers in the world in terms of goals and assists, which even though he was injured and the eye test wasn't quite there, he looked shaky and he looked quite off it at times. Output wise, he was excellent. Last season, it's absolutely fallen off a cliff for him. But one of the areas that Ten Hag is, I wouldn't say obsessed with, but certainly relies on heavily is his wingers to create that space, to keep the ball wide. And I think Marcus Rashford can absolutely benefit from that. One of the things that he does, like I said, he pulls the wingers very wide, which allows the players in midfield to have more space. It also allows for one-on-one dribbling, which is something that Rashford is much better at than he is trying to dribble through a sort of clustered tight defence that is sort of in between the lines of his 18-yard box. That's somewhere he's really struggled this year, isn't it?
Yeah, he has. you've seen there's a lack of confidence, and the systems that we've been playing in where people have been allowed to double up on Marcus Rashford, he's not been allowed to isolate players, he's not been allowed to run in behind as well. It's been a case of you've got Marcus Rashford picking the ball up with 2 or 3 players around him, and he looks nervous about it. There's so many different things that you could bring excuses into it where he's had his injuries, maybe there's not a bit of confidence, maybe all these things have happened that he's not quite got it. Maybe the changeover in managers wasn't suiting him. Maybe the changeover in playing staff around him wasn't quite right. But he did look to have a lack of confidence. But if you give him the right system, if you give him the right times, you've seen how we did it even when he first came into the team under Mourinho, when they kind of pitted him in between Alexander-Arnold in that Liverpool game. Getting in those channels, being direct against those players, being 1v1. He can score goals, and he does score big goals in big games when he's allowed to do that.
He's a big game player. That's one thing about Rashford that no one can disagree with. The amount of times he scored against Chelsea, City, PSG, like Liverpool. He's, he is a big game player. And just a couple of stats to illustrate how much he struggled this season, because obviously he's one again that you don't need stats to show that Marcus Rashford has been poor this season. But Marcus Rashford's successful dribble percentage, so when he starts dribbling, does he end that dribble with the ball at his feet, is in the bottom 1% of wingers. That's because, 1, he's got no confidence, 2, he's not really had chance to play his way back into form, and you can't blame the manager for doing that because he's just not been good enough. But 3, that's because we don't create the space that allows him to isolate players one-on-one. An interesting thing that Ten Hag does, and if you haven't checked out our Ten Hag tactics video already, make sure you do. Me and Steve, looking on the board, going through tactics, going through screenshots and everything. But one thing he does is he creates huge spaces, even against teams with a low block. And that's so important in modern football. Teams are so good at sitting back. If you can't create space when teams are sat back, you can't create space. And we've seen that from United over the last few years. But what he does is he keeps his wingers so wide that even when the ball's played to them, it doesn't matter whether the defence is in their own 18-yard box, there's still space for those wingers. The defence is still stretched out, because if you want to cover that winger, your fullback better be near him. But if your fullback's near him, there's now a big gap between him and the centre-back, the next centre-back, and the other fullback. And I think Marcus Rashford, of everyone in the squad, will benefit from that. Again, he has got that pace. He can attack the space inside with the ball himself, and he's good at bringing other people into the game as well. And I don't mean this in a bad way, he can't have another season like last year.
No, he can't.
He can't afford that. I don't think the fans would accept it. I don't think the club would accept it. He has to turn it around this year. And I think of all the players, he's the one where, obviously I like Harry Maguire. I think he's a little bit hard done by at times. But Marcus Rashford is such a likeable person and such a good player. He's the one, almost of all of these, that I really hope turns it around the most.
I think you look at ceilings of footballers as well. I think Marcus Rashford, when he, a couple of years ago, and where he was being mentioned, the stats comparisons in the age times was what Cristiano Ronaldo was doing at Manchester United. They were the comparisons at that time. Now people are going to go, he's never going to do that, and he probably won't, because not many will.
No man in history has
no
ever
man
done
in
what
history will
Ronaldo's
do
done.
that. But that was the kind of bracket we were talking about, and I'm not saying he's going to reach that, but he was also being compared to numbers-wise to Mane. You've seen how well he's done at Liverpool, you've seen the numbers he puts up, and you've seen where he's gone on to play at Bayern Munich. I still think that Marcus Rashford can have that kind of path in terms of scoring goals in big games, getting back to scoring 20 to 30 goals a season, and being one of the best forwards in the Premier League. May not be one of the best of all time like Cristiano Ronaldo, but he can't do what he did last season. And look, it'll have to be a wait and see. We're hoping you've seen the clips of him doing the work. He's back in training this week because he wasn't involved in the internationals. You're hoping that he kicks on, and you're hoping you get back to Marcus Rashford of old.
Yeah, exactly. And Ten Hag has kind of often employed this sort of one more physical, athletic, quick winger on one side, which would be, sort of your Rashford, and then on the other side a slightly more creative, focused, skillful, slower winger, which may be Jadon Sancho for United. Jadon Sancho doesn't knock the ball past people and win it on the other side like Marcus Rashford does. But you allow Rashford to do what he's good at, which is isolating players one-on-one, having shots on goal, bringing other people into the pitch. And then you allow that space and creativity for the likes of Jadon Sancho. Let's move on finally to Fred, because he's someone who it seems like everyone's tipping Fred to be the next best thing next year. because he had a decent end to the season.
Yeah.
But I want to go through Fred a little bit more and sort of talk about what exactly Ten Hag will expect from him. And strangely enough, the player that we're going to compare him to is actually Davy Klaassen, who had a failed spell at Everton. I think he was there for a year, barely played for them, but has been pretty integral at Ajax since rejoining there. He isn't the best on the ball. He isn't scoring tons of goals. I think he got 9 goals last season, which obviously is more than Fred tends to get, but he isn't, a Bruno Fernandes type player. He is an industrious, hard-working, sniffing out danger type of player that is just always on the opposition. And I think Fred, we know that he's brilliant at that, don't we?
Yeah. We do, and we seen that last year. Maybe the only positive under Ralph Rangnick, apart from maybe Cristiano Ronaldo scoring a few goals, was Fred. I think that once kind of figured it out, whether McTominay was playing a lot deeper, Matic was playing a lot of games, but whatever that system was that Rangnick was having, we looked our best with Fred further forward. And I think Carrick did it in his first few games as well. Just move Fred further forward, allow him to not be the one that's picking the ball off the back four, which he's not good at. No. Not be the person that gets put under pressure, but someone that wins the ball back a little bit higher up, someone that drives into the box and someone can do that. Now look, is he the best in the world at that? No, I don't think he's going to be. But when you put him in the right system, there's a lot of, you can compare international football. There's a lot of good midfielders that play for Brazil at the minute, and Fred plays most of the time alongside Fabinho. And people keep going, he's not as good as Fabinho. I know Fabinho plays alongside him, and you're hoping that this combination that it looks like it's probably going to be Fred and Frankie De Jong for a lot of the games next season. That's what we have going forward. A lot of people have talked about we've not got this number 6. Ten Hag has never played with a number 6 on his own. He's talked about this playing with 2 6s, maybe someone that has the ball playing ability that someone like Frankie De Jong has, and someone that maybe kind of breaks down play a little bit more.
Again, I don't think the quality is there. Obviously, Kante and Fred. Kante's won so much more. He's a much better player. I'm not talking about the top end quality, but again, we have to go back to the point of United aren't signing 10 players this window. No. So someone like Fred is going to be playing more often than not. And when you compare him to Kante is often misconstrued as a deep line number 6, when actually what he does more often than not is he pushes higher up the pitch and wins the ball back brilliantly. He's not someone who's defensively disciplined who sits in front of the defence. That's what Jorginho does. So if you almost have that similar, again, the quality isn't the same, but if you compare the dynamic where you've got De Jong who gets the ball off the defence, turns on the half turn and brings other people into the pitch like Jorginho does, and then you've got Fred who isn't receiving the ball off the defence because he's not as good on it. He loses the ball all the time when he's pressed, but you can have him further up the pitch like Kante does. Then you've got a midfield that maybe doesn't need a Matic type player in there to get the ball and turn and tackle, because Fred is in 90 percentile plus in terms of pressures, tackles, tackles leading to chances for his team, and that's because he's been playing slightly further up last season. Like I said, like you said, there are better players in the world than Fred, much better, but unfortunately or fortunately for United, he's going to be playing most games next season because we don't have that player, and we do have him. So it's about getting the best out of him. And the thing with Ten Hag is as well, we've spoke about this in so many videos, but one of the sort of crucial things of his system, regardless of position, whether it be centre back, midfield, attack, in position out of it, is a sort of a fluidity within a structure, and that's something that Fred's excellent at, in it, being mobile within his position. And I think that's, like you said, hopefully that will get the best out of him next season.
Hopefully you see that from Fred. And you look at, people always sadly using Liverpool as a comparison because of the way they went about things, of being quite a poor team to them being what they've become now. Klopp didn't sign these big players in his first few windows. He didn't sign potentially his core. He didn't sign Alisson straight away. He didn't sign Van Dijk straight away. He didn't sign Fabinho. So he was in a midfield where you kind of go, he's not quite got Fabinho yet. He's not got that player who's playing with Wijnaldum and Henderson and Milner a lot of the time. Lallana was in there. It was good, but it wasn't quite Chamberlain as well. But then he upgraded that. And maybe that's the path that United kind of have to go on. You're going to upgrade massively having Frankie De Jong in there. Fred can do a job for a bit, being that player alongside of him. But hopefully, in 12 months' time, when the right player is available at the right price, I think that's Declan Rice is potentially that player who can potentially do that. But at this moment in time, 150 million quid for Declan Rice isn't the right thing to do.
No.
And if you can get a balance with Fred and De Jong for this season, and then you do your Fabinho signing or your Rodri signing where you go, or like I said, Declan Rice, then you upgrade massively 12 months down the line.
Definitely. Right, that's going to be all from us. Let us know in the comments whether we've missed anyone or whether we're being too optimistic. The thing we have to remember is Ten Hag is the manager of the squad. He isn't just here to rip that one up and start again. No. He has to get the best out of the players we've got. And unfortunately, for a lot of people who don't like to admit it, the manager who's probably got the best out of the squad he's had is Solskjaer. In terms of, consistent finishes in the Premier League, he's the only manager we've had that's finished top 4 2 seasons in a row. So if he can get, top 4 out of this squad, surely Ten Hag can as well. We're going to have to see players improve in order to do that, and we think those are a few good examples. Let us know in the comments. Are we missing someone? Is Donny van der Beek the person to turn it around? Luke Shaw maybe can refine that form from a couple of seasons ago. Who knows? Let us know in the comments below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. This has been Manchester United's player revival under Ten Hag. We'll see you in a bit.